I never thought I'd see such a scene. It was just another day after school, and I thought I'd have the house to myself. But what I found through my stepmother's open door left me speechless. I was surprised by something I didn't expect. My whole world changed suddenly. What happened between us was a big deal. I'm going to tell you what happened that night. I want to say that everything was consensual. It might not seem like it, but it's the truth. When I got home after a long day at school, I was tired from all the classes I had taken. When I got home, the house was really quiet. The only sound I could hear was the refrigerator humming. The room was brightly lit by the late afternoon sun, which shone through the windows and onto the wooden floor. It made the room feel calm and peaceful. I thought I was alone, so I put my heavy backpack on the couch. I was going to get something to eat and relax for a bit before my family came home. But when I went into the kitchen, something made me stop suddenly. It was a soft sound, but I could hear it clearly. I stood there for a moment, unsure of what I was hearing. It was soft, like a quiet whisper, but it had a distinct quality and a personal, private essence that made me feel a little uneasy. I listened more closely, trying to figure out where it was coming from. It wasn't loud, but it was interesting. The sound had a quality that grabbed my attention. I quietly made my way down the corridor, listening carefully. When I reached Sophia's room, I saw that her door was slightly open, and I caught a glimpse of the bed and I didn't see much of the room beyond, but I knew I shouldn't look. My instincts told me to turn and leave, but my curiosity got the better of me. I couldn't resist going over to the door. When I looked through the keyhole, I saw my stepmother Aurora lying on the bed. Her back was arched a bit, and her eyes were closed, and she seemed to be in a state of pure bliss. I was so surprised I couldn't move. I stood there, breathing heavily, my throat feeling tight as I watched her. My mind was racing to understand what I was seeing. She was doing something to herself. She was stimulating herself with her fingers, moving them gently and regularly as quiet moans came out of her lips. I was blown away by what I was seeing. My pulse accelerated, and I felt a surge of warmth in my chest. I wanted to retreat and ignore what was going on, but I couldn't move. I was frozen in place, watching her every move. Each subtle movement she made me feel something deep inside. The Aurora was stunning. Her body exuded an effortless, natural elegance. Just as I was about to look away, she caught my gaze. I felt a moment of panic, convinced I'd been discovered. Instead of reacting with shock or anger, she simply looked at me. It was a kind, welcoming gaze, free of surprise or shame. There was a slow, smoldering intensity that made my skin quiver and my breath catch as she whispered in a low voice, warmly inviting me in. For a second, I thought I could have made the whole thing up. But as I stayed where I was, she gave me the same tempting grin and said the invitation again, more firmly. My legs seemed to move on their own, taking me into the room. My heart beat faster with each step. I felt a strange mix of anxiety and excitement as I stood by the bed, looking down at it. I could feel the tension. Between us, there was a tangible atmosphere. Sophia initially remained silent, observing me with her penetrating gaze. It seemed to perceive my innermost thoughts. I swallowed with difficulty, attempting to articulate myself, but no words emerged from my lips. My thoughts were disordered, but she remained unaffected by my quiet. She extended her hand, grasping mine. Her touch was gentle yet assertive as she drew me nearer. My pulse raced, and a nod of I felt anxious, but also excited and eager as I sat down next to her on the edge of the bed. Aurora kept her hand on mine, but instead of letting go, she guided my hand slowly up her thigh. I could feel the warmth of her skin, and my breath caught in my throat as I sensed her palm above mine, guiding me with slow, deliberate movements. I could feel her pulse beneath her skin and the gentle rise and fall of her chest as she inhaled and exhaled. I could feel her chest rise and fall as she inhaled and exhaled. She murmured to me, her voice almost inaudible yet filled with love that made my heart ache. She told me not to, but I hesitated to relax and nodded, unsure if I felt more anxious or exhilarated. Her fingers intertwined with mine, guiding and instructing me. We synchronized perfectly, each touch sending a surge of energy through me, and I sensed our connection intensifying with each moment. It was beyond the physical. It was something deeper, something profound and genuine. The moment stretched out as the outside world disappeared, leaving only the two of us in an experience that felt both wrong and right. Time seemed to slow down, and each breath and touch lasted forever as the tension between us reached a breaking point. Aurora drew me closer to her body, and I felt her heat, her breath on my neck, and her lips on mine. She spoke gently, her tone breathy and urgent. She seemed reluctant for me to leave, even though I wanted to. The connection between us was strong, and we were inseparable. This moment was important. I leaned in closer to her, and her breath warmed my skin. Time seemed to freeze, and the world paused. As we teetered on the brink of an undeniable moment, the atmosphere between us was loaded with suspense. I felt like I was the only person in the room. Sophia gently leaned forward, and her lips touched mine, sending a wave of warmth through me. It was a soft, tentative kiss at first, like we were gauging the situation. Her lips pressed more forcefully against mine while her hand continued to direct me. She showed me what she wanted. We both wanted a slow, sensual kiss. It was intense, but also mild. In that moment, it seemed like all the repressed feelings were being released with each touch, breath, and heartbeat. We ultimately gave in to the tension that had accumulated between us. We stayed in that embrace for what seemed like an eternity. The world beyond could see it. I could feel Sophia's body shaking gently against mine. Her breathing was soft and delicate. The space between us closed up a bit. Her forehead was pressed against mine, her eyes were half closed, and she was catching her breath. I could see she was happy, and my heart swelled with happiness too. She asked if I was okay, but her voice was barely audible. She was so happy, she couldn't even speak. She smiled again, her fingertips brushing against mine. She ran her fingers through my hair and kissed my cheek. The space was filled with a lovely, peaceful calm. The stress we'd been feeling before was replaced by a gentle, radiant serenity. We sat together in silence for a while, just breathing together. The heat between us started to normalize, becoming warmer and more intimate. Aurora rested her head on my shoulder, and I wrapped my arm around her. With my arm, we sat, drawing her closer. The light of the afternoon was fading, and the sounds of the house were enveloping us. Whatever this connection was, it was new, delicate, and completely unexpected. But at that moment, nothing else mattered. The only thing that mattered was that we were together, having an experience that seemed extraordinary and beyond anything we had imagined. For the moment, that was enough. The peaceful familiarity between us seemed to intensify. As time passed, the sunlight streaming through the window gradually faded, casting a soft amber glow across the room. Despite this, everything felt vibrant and alive. The gravity of recent events lingered in the air, but we were both anticipating something. There was an unresolved tension in the air. I saw Sophia's body relax a bit against mine, but her proximity and her hand on my thigh indicated it was clear that whatever had begun between us was far from over. My heart was still racing. I felt a strange mix of excitement and anxiety. I could feel her presence, her gentle breath on my skin, the warmth of her body pressed against mine, and the smell of her perfume filled the air as she leaned her head slightly, her lips grazing the side of my neck, sending shivers down my spine. The contact was brief, but it ignited a fire inside me. It turned into a smoldering hunger. I closed my eyes for a second to let the sensation envelop me, then looked at her. Her eyes were locked with mine, and I could see a distinct change in her gaze. There was an intensity and darkness there, but behind it I saw a hunger that mirrored my own. Aurora remained. She didn't say anything, but her fingers tracing patterns on my knee told me what I needed to know. I leaned forward and kissed her again, this time without hesitation or tentative exploration of limits. The kiss was deep and passionate, as if the suppressed desire we both felt had finally been unleashed. Her hands, she moved her fingers into the fabric of my shirt as she drew me closer. I could feel her body reacting to mine. The gentle pressure of her body against me made me feel disoriented. This encounter felt illicit, which only made it more alluring. I suddenly realized that she was my stepmother, a figure who had always been elusive. The connection between us seemed to be getting more and more intense. I couldn't resist wanting more from Sophia. She grabbed the back of my neck and pulled me closer as she lay on the bed against the cushions. She guided me, and I gave in to the attraction between us. I was overwhelmed by its power, and I soon found myself I was floating on air as I looked down at her. Rose was breathing heavily, her chest moving up and down. She dropped down quickly, her eyes fixed on me. There was a tangible tension between us, and she touched her fingers softly to the shape of my jaw before pulling me down again. Our lips were pressed together. We kissed again. This time her hands went up my back and shoulders, pulling me closer until we were touching. I could feel the warmth of Sophia's body, her heartbeat racing against mine. I put my hand on her side, feeling I traced the gentle contour of her waist beneath my fingertips, pausing momentarily as I reached the hem of her shirt. I was uncertain whether I was overstepping boundaries, but she didn't withdraw. Instead, she arched her back gently, allowing me to make contact. Her body was clearly responding to me in a way that conveyed her desires. I slid my finger beneath the cloth, and as I moved my hand along her warm, smooth skin, I heard her gentle gasp. A surge of warmth ran through me as my hands entwined in her hair, drawing me nearer. She intensified the kiss, her lips slightly apart, inviting me to experience her essence. It was intoxicating. I could sense the tension in her body through her movements. Every touch was urgent. It was difficult underneath me. Our thoughts were consumed by one another. Every obstacle between us disintegrated. We yielded to the long simmering longing. There was no possibility of retreat. We were burdened by that we both seemed totally at ease with the gravity of what we knew. All that mattered was that we were together. The attraction that united us was undeniable. Sophia's hands were everywhere, tracing the contours of my shoulders, arms, and chest as if she couldn't get enough of me. The more I touched her, the more I wanted her. It felt like we'd been holding back for a long time, and now that we couldn't hold back anymore, we couldn't stop. She was quiet. She groaned against my lips, her fingers gripping my hair tightly as she rubbed her body against mine. The sound made me realize I needed her even more. I wanted her taste, her scent, the feeling of her under me. I was overwhelmed. I couldn't think straight. I realized that retreat was impossible. I momentarily withdrew my gaze. I looked at hers to see if she was still there in this experience. I still wanted as intensely as before, but her gaze told me everything I needed to know. She gave me the assurance and certainty I needed. There are no doubts, there's just the persistent thirst that has been there from the start, compelling us further in silence as Aurora extends. Ed reached out and touched me again, her fingers curling inward. She tugged at my shirt with a gentle urgency as our lips met again. I found myself giving into the moment, letting go of any doubts or anxieties and surrendering to the passion that had been building between us since I arrived. The tension between us was palpable. Each touch and kiss brought us closer to the edge. Her body undulated beneath mine, her hands traversing my skin as if she couldn't get enough of the sound of her frantic gasps permeating the room, inciting my fervor. We were entwined with one another, fully engulfed by the passion that had we were both caught up in the moment. There was no way to back away. I could feel her fingers tracing down my chest, sending shivers through me as she pulled me closer. Her body curved beneath mine, almost as if she was pleading for more. I gave her everything I had, every touch, every kiss, every whispered phrase. We were both completely absorbed in the moment, the two of us alone in our own world. The reality we created together was intense. The tension between us reached a critical point as we were on the verge of a profound connection. We were not yet ready to let go, and we remained on the edge, experiencing each touch and kiss as the passion between us intensified. I sensed Aurora trembling. I could feel her breath getting shallower and more erratic as she grasped me tighter. Her body was pressed against mine in a way that made me feel a bit disoriented, and I could tell she was feeling it too. The same intense tension and urgent need for liberation persisted, but we hadn't reached that point yet. We were still on the edge, prolonging the moment and letting the suspense build up. The room was packed with noise, our groans, murmured names, and the subtle intensity of our emotions as we surrendered to the passion that had been brewing between us for a while. This moment was flawless. Our connection was undeniable, and as I embraced her, our bodies synchronized perfectly. I realized that nothing would ever be the same. We'd crossed a line and gone where we shouldn't have. It was risky, but I was pretty detached at the time. What mattered most was Aurora's kiss, feeling her against me as we got lost in each other and gave in to the overwhelming intensity. I realized this was just the start. It didn't matter what came next or what the consequences might be. I was ready to face them as we hugged in the fading daylight. I realized that everything had changed, and I wouldn't want it any other way. As the passion between Wayne, Aurora, and me intensified, the room grew quiet. Only the soft rustling of sheets remained. As we got closer, the last rays of sunshine disappeared, and we were left in the soft glow of twilight. I looked at her closely, taking in every detail, the blush on her cheeks, the sparkle in her eyes, and the way her hair fell over the pillow. Part of me was still surprised about what had happened, but the warmth of her body against mine was undeniable. I was a bit nervous about disturbing the peace, but Aurora stroked her fingertips along mine and smiled as she said, "We'll figure it out. We know this won't be easy, but we're in this together." As we lay entwined in each other's embrace, those concerns seemed insignificant. We chatted. That night, we spoke in low voices and shared our thoughts, feelings, and desires. It was interesting how something that seemed wrong but wasn't became our natural way of communicating in the following weeks. We developed a new routine, approaching it with caution, especially in the presence of others. But in private moments, glances and touches showed our secret affair. It wasn't always smooth sailing. We felt remorse and apprehension when we heard my father's key in the lock. After we got together, we were both pretty surprised at first. But we learned to be subtle and value our private time without letting it affect our public lives. About a month after that first time, Aurora and I were sitting on the couch watching a movie. My father often worked late, so when the movie ended, Aurora looked at me. She was serious, and we needed to talk about the future. She explained her thoughts in a calm but firm way. My heart was racing. She said that she could feel a connection beyond the physical realm. I told her that I didn't feel the same way. It was just physical for me, I think. "I believe I am falling in love with you, Sophia." Her magnificent smile illuminated her face as she leaned in to kiss me gently. She murmured against my lips that she believes she is also falling in love with me. However, such acknowledgement introduced a new array of obstacles. We both recognized that the revelation of our relationship would inflict distress and bewilderment on individuals in our vicinity. The burden of concealing this secret from my father and mother increasingly affected both of us over time. Our bond intensified. We developed a nonverbal communication system to help us understand one another's wants and wishes in an unprecedented manner. It was both exciting and daunting. Verbal communication helped us understand each other better than ever before. It was both exciting and daunting. There were near misses, like when my closest friend visited and almost discovered us in a compromising situation, or the evening my father returned home early, which forced us to leave quickly. It seems we were only engaged in a casual dialogue each time, but these near misses made us more cautious and also made us think. We were finding it difficult to maintain this pace over time. The persistent anxiety of vigilance was affecting us both. A particularly narrow escape precipitated our inaugural significant conflict. Emotions were running high, and we both spoke words we did not intend. I exited abruptly, spending the night driving around the town aimlessly. My thoughts were a tumult of uncertainty and pain. However, with the dawn, I found myself once more at our threshold. Aurora opened the door before me. I could even see her eyes ringed in red, following a night without sleep. We embraced, each of us expressing remorse through our tears. We acknowledged that the terrible conflict had fortified us. We recognized that our relationship was worthy of defense as we began to safeguard our conversations. We contemplated our future and the potential implications of making our connection permanent. We were aware of it, but we knew it wouldn't be. It was pretty simple. There would be astonishment, despite potential disappointment and perhaps even fury from our closest companions when we convened to plan and dream. I had an unprecedented sense of hope as months elapsed. Our closeness intensified. We mastered the art of leading a dual existence, portraying responsible individuals as nurturing stepmothers in public while being fervent lovers in secret. We both acknowledged that this reality couldn't endure indefinitely. As the one-year anniversary approached, we realized it was time to stop avoiding the issue and face up to the consequences of our choices. We spent weeks planning the announcement, thinking through every detail. Then, on a calm Sunday afternoon, we made the announcement. On Sunday afternoon, with our hearts racing and hands shaking, we sat down with my father to tell him the truth. The conversation was one of the hardest I've ever had. There were tears, raised voices, and moments of complete silence. But as I held Sophia's hand, I was sure we were making the right call. The road ahead would be tough, but we had to rebuild bridges and rebuild trust. As we looked ahead together, I was reminded of the past. One afternoon a year ago, at a pivotal moment, everything changed. Despite the challenges and struggles, I wouldn't change a thing because that moment led me to this love that was beyond my expectations. As I looked at Aurora, I saw the same love reflected in her eyes. I knew that whatever was ahead, we would face it together.